I'm Nick Armstrong, and you're watching Dear Fort Collins, a podcast featuring the people that make Fort Collins a wonderful place to live. This series of episodes is all about the election that's happening in November 2025. And we're interviewing all of the different candidates for mayor, city council, and PSD School Board. And we want to hear from them in their own words about why they're running, what they care about, and you then can be more informed about who you're voting for when it's time to fill out your ballot. With ranked choice voting, it's really difficult to know sometimes who your candidates are and what order you're going to rank them in. So I hope these series of episodes really help you figure out which candidates best align with your interests and needs. And as we do these interviews, I want you to know that I have given the candidates access to the questions in advance. I try to ask all of the candidates the same questions, or at least give them an opportunity to answer the same questions in the same kind of way. And there's very minimal editing on any of these episodes. So unless there was an errant sneeze or a cat jumping on someone's lap, you're hearing from the candidates in their own words. I do have a quick disclaimer to give you that I serve on the Parks and Recreation Board for the city of Fort Collins, and my opinions on this show are my own. They're not the position of the board or of the city. And I have also advised a number of the candidates about their campaigns, and in some cases have either helped with their campaigns or made a donation here or there. I do my absolute best to make sure that they all get fair treatment, that there aren't any favorites being played, and that also we're asking them the same types of questions and they have an opportunity to answer those in kind. I hope that you enjoy these episodes and that they help you become a more informed voter in the upcoming election. And if you do have any questions, concerns, or comments, please let me know and reach out on the Dear Fort Collins website. I'm always happy to hear from you. And some of the questions that you'll hear me ask of the candidates have been submitted by listeners and watchers just like you. Folks who are fans of the show and want to know more about particular candidates and their positions on particular things. So with that, let's get on with the show. On this episode of Dear Fort Collins, we have Tom Griggs, who is running for school board in District D for Poudre School District. Tom, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks, Nick. I really like the title of your program, Dear Fort Collins, because Fort Collins has become very dear to me.
It's a love letter to all the people that make Fort Collins a special place to live. So, you've put yourself out there to run for school board. What motivated you to run?
Oh, man. So long story. I've been an educator for 35 years. I've worked at all levels of the system. I got to make a confession, though, Nick, in advance. I am a clown school dropout. It was when my career in clowning failed that I decided I needed to look for a new line of work. And I ended up becoming a teacher instead, which actually is, clowning, it turns out, is pretty good preparation for being a teacher because you got to entertain your students to engage them, I think.
Yeah, clowns are all about the crowd work and being able to make people, not only not afraid, but like to engage with the show.
That's right. And be attracted to me as a candidate and as a person and all that good stuff. So that's part of what my attraction is and my desire to serve. But frankly, I have lived here for 25 years now, and I've raised 2 kids through the school system here in Poudre School District. I have former students of mine from my days of teaching at UNC for 20 years, now teaching in the public school system. And in fact, I've substitute taught for many of them, for one in particular, who went on maternity leave for the last few months of the 2020-2021 school year. And so I got baptism of fire by working during the pandemic as a substitute teacher. And I've been substitute teaching for 5 years, and I love it. I actually really enjoy the work, believe it or not, in spite of the way we used to treat substitute teachers.
So, subbing in the district, what other unique experience do you bring to the table to help you serve PSD families effectively?
Okay, there's one thing I got to mention because it ties into something that's been a challenge for me as a candidate. My background is deep as a professor of foundations of education and teaching about bilingual and ESL education at UNC for 20 years before I retired in 2020. I was very involved in state level education policy issues, and I started a statewide organization because I saw the relationship between state level education policy, local education policy, and the success my former students, were likely to have as they began their careers and or continued their careers in schooling. And so I am very passionate about what I do. I am a scholar in the field of foundations of education, which means the social context of education. And I believe I understand it at a level that is unmatched by any of the other candidates. There's one other candidate who is pretty strong, not running against me, but who has a very strong background in formal education in the field of education. But I have studied it from where the rubber meets the road in classrooms in Poudre School District, in Thompson School District, all the way through to the state level where it's influenced by state level education policy and everything in between. And I just think it's an unusual background and a unique and broad and very helpful background that I hope to bring to the school board.
So given your background, can you share a project or a policy or an issue that you'd like to tackle first if you're elected?
My first priority is going to be building a positive and constructive relationship with the other members of the board. I will be one of 7 board members. I need to persuade people of my perspective on things when I have one, and when I don't, I need to listen. I need to learn. I need to keep learning. That's what drew me into the field in the first place, teaching and learning about how people learn things. And I know that I benefit tremendously from, as I was saying earlier, my substitute teaching experience. So I'm going to be working on developing those relationships. But beyond that, just to avoid being accused of not really having a plan for what I would like to do, one of the things that's challenging our current board, I think, is that we have not reviewed our board policies in a decade. And I can only assume that's because board members are so consumed with the other responsibilities they have. I don't think anybody is ignoring board policy out of bad faith or trying to mess things up or stir anything up. These people are all volunteers. They do this on top of oftentimes full-time jobs. And it's challenging to do a conscientious and thorough job as a school board member if you've got to keep a day job, which is the case for almost all the other candidates. I have the good fortune to be only partly retired. I'm half-time retired, and so I plan to dedicate up to half-time work as a volunteer member of the school board because I am deeply committed, as reflected in my career choice, to the future of our country, to the present in our country, to helping the kids in our district and their families be successful and receive all the benefits of a good education.
What do you see as the most pressing needs of Poudre School District students right now?
See, this is a good example of something that ties back to state level and even federal level policy. I think we too often judge schools by a standardized test score. And because we do that so profoundly and so deeply, and at the same time so superficially, we say, oh, let's go to that school, they got good test scores. We sometimes miss the entire boat. We don't recognize that kids are human beings. They are growing and developing. One of my favorite expressions of all time about schools and education is from Mark Twain. He said, "I never let my schooling interfere with my education." And I love that because it really captures what education is all about. Parents play such an important role in their kids' education. They are their kids' first teachers, right? Clearly, in so many ways, and even not even particularly consciously in every case. I mean, parents are living their lives trying to maintain and support their kids. They're not paying. Am I being a teacher today? No, but they are. And so that's something I want to rebuild. I would like to increase people's awareness of that. I like the idea of working with parents to address their needs. And I think that's a really important function in a pluralistic society like ours, that parents feel like their schools are supporting their education, big education goals for their kids, and also treating them well in schools. And that applies to any subpopulation of the schools that you choose, whether it's kids with disabilities or kids who are trying to learn English or kids who are what they call Title I, who can barely afford breakfast and lunch and who would get support from our tax dollars for eating well so that they can maintain their focus and benefit. And the teachers are amazing, man. I see time and again amazing teachers who connect with their kids and understand that their kids are whole human beings and that they have to be feeling pretty good and not hungry and not disillusioned and not incapable if they're going to get anywhere with their educations. And so it's that big thing that I want to help facilitate.
So specifically on the topic of ensuring that our schools are safe and welcoming and inclusive for all students, what actions do you see as a board member that you can take to help make sure that PSD schools are safe and welcoming and inclusive for all students, including LGBTQ and multilingual and those with disabilities and Title I students?
So when I was deciding to become an educator and I realized, I need to learn so much more about teaching and learning than I can do in my one-year teacher education program, and decided I was going to continue pursuing higher education and get all the way to a PhD where I could pile it higher and deeper, I recognized that the project of helping kids as a board member was making people aware of how challenging it was for some kids and how it was more challenging for some kids than for others to be successful, however we define that. And the definitions of success are so different. Hey, if I can help my kid get a job that pays $35 an hour because now they know how to weld or they know how to repair automobiles, or whatever it is, or as this new center that's been recently opened, had a ribbon cutting is open. I want to promote people's awareness in the general community. I want to speak up for those voices. I have strong ties because of my background as a second language educator. I have especially strong ties to schools like Harris Bilingual Immersion School, to Irish Elementary. A lot of these schools are actually in District D. So one thing that I would like to promote is the idea that maybe we should be elected by district rather than district-wide. This is a key idea that I think might be beneficial. I've watched a version of that happen at the city council, and I see that city council members feel responsive to their districts in a way that is positive and constructive. Of course, you got to balance that against their responsibility to represent the city as a whole as well. But that's one thing. I like the idea of school board members developing closer ties to the community in general, and maybe even as specifically as the schools within a particular district.
Do you see that as a way that you would be able to better partner with families in the broader community? Or is there other tools that you would like to leverage besides, changing the nature of the elections?
Don't misinterpret what I'm saying as I'm only going to represent the schools in District D. That's not the case. That's not the case. The fact is, I have been involved in all these different levels in state level education policy and in participating in groups that are aware of the impact of specific legislation at the state level for what it means for local schools, because I understand that this is all connected. What I do in District D or for the schools in District D affects what happens for the schools in the other districts. I'm not going to abandon my concern about the district overall, but I firmly believe that if we can commit to helping the kids who are most in need throughout the district, and we want to raise test scores, while we're making people aware that test scores are not the be all and end all of schooling, then we can actually help the individual families meet their success goals at the same time we're trying to do it for the district as a whole.
Looping back to something that you said a little bit earlier, you want to see a closer partnership with families and the district. Talk to me about what that looks like as a board member.
I wish I could get more specific about one of the obstacles, excuse me, one of the obstacles we face, I think, is that we have this policy in place called policy governance. And what it has meant for school boards since it was implemented in the mid-1990s is that school boards have one employee that they are responsible for evaluating and responsible for critiquing their work and giving them feedback and setting goals and all the rest of it. It's called policy governance. And it was implemented because there was concern about individual board members inappropriately influencing what was happening at their kids' school and and kind of getting enmeshed in maybe what some people would call micromanagement. So this was a big issue, and that's why policy governance was adopted. And it turned out to be one of those things where, oh, policy governance, what a wonderful solution to this problem we're having with inappropriate influence or whatever. I don't know the details, and I don't know who might have been involved, but I do know that the board decided we're going to adopt a form of what's called the Carver model of policy governance. And now what we're seeing, I think, is maybe policy governance in the extreme. We've had some pretty difficult almost, I would say, crisis level issues arise in the school district recently. There was a big lawsuit that cost the district lots and lots of money, and who knows what it's going to cost us in increased premiums for liability, insurance premiums for liability in the future. We'll find out soon when they send us the bill, just like they do when you have auto insurance, you have an accident, suddenly you're uninsurable, right? That kind of stuff. I don't know how that's going to work out. I still have so much to learn about the budget specifics. But I also need to be aware that I'm going to need to negotiate what I'm allowed to do as a board member as much as what I would like to do. I mean, it's easy to stand outside the board and say, oh, the board should do this. Oh, the board should do that. Oh, the board. Well, legally, there are restrictions on what the board can and individual members of the board can and can't do. And I have a lot to learn about that. And I am sure there is nobody either running for election or hoping to win a seat right now that is fully informed about where those limits are and what they entail. And that's why I'm in favor of reviewing the policy that was once in place to set up the structure whereby our only employee is our superintendent, and we've got to treat him legally correctly as well, by the way, because we have a contract with him. We do not need a lawsuit about failing to live up to the terms of a contract we have with them. And fiscal responsibility as a board member is probably our number one, number two, mission, fiscal responsibility. They're pretty close to one another.
Changing gears just a little, how do you see PSD better supporting teachers and staff to help reduce burnout and improve retention?
Now, this is home run territory for me, Nick. I am a teacher educator. I teach teachers. I believe in ongoing professional development. And I know there's a lot of teachers that maybe are feeling like, I've had it up to here with professional development. It's all I can do to keep my job together the way it's expected of me. And so it seems as though there's a fair number of teachers who are always on the verge of burning out and going over the edge of burnout, I guess you might call it, or something beyond the boundaries of burnout. But There's also amazing, amazing teachers. Everywhere I substitute, I'm just in awe. And not all of them are my students, so I can't claim full responsibility for that. They are amazing. They go out of their way for kids. They get kids write them love letters because they're so appreciative of the impact they've had. And I go in their classrooms, and you can almost tell by the notes they leave for the lesson plan for the day as a substitute what kind of teachers you're coming in contact. You can tell a lot about the environment in the classroom, about how the kids respond to having a substitute, all kinds of information. But I've actually benefited from being more optimistic after 5 years of being a substitute teacher than I was before. And so I am very, very supportive of teachers. I think we need to be careful to really learn and we've got to be careful about slates running, vote for these 3 candidates because they represent some very broad notion of, oh, that sounds good. Yeah, we'll vote for that. No, get to know the candidates. Find out whether you want to find out more about me and my candidacy. I spent a lot of time this summer trying to lay that out on my website, and that's one of the places what you mentioned we might get to is sharing our information about how to find out more about me. But again, I think I'm a kind of a unique candidate in terms of the depth and range of my background, and I hope people notice that and get a chance to see that clearly.
So we've talked about treating people well. Your background as a teacher's teacher. What do you believe the role of the district is in supporting mental health for students and staff?
Well, it gets back to my comment about the relationship between education and schooling, and the whole child. I refer in my on my website to the whole child. I think we do have a role to play in mental health. We don't have absolute control over it, and nor should we. Again, it needs to be done in partnership with parents and in partnership with maybe professionals who are more experienced, for example, in counseling and advising kids and helping them through problems they have, not just in school, but sometimes outside of school. And in fact, there's all kinds of laws set up that dictate to counselors and advisors and teachers about when it's necessary to step in with regard to issues that are outside of school, right? And some of them involved trying to deter kids from having to enter the criminal justice system because they stole a candy bar at the local store and got into some trouble. And are they going to go through the criminal justice system and get a misdemeanor on their record? Or are there practices like restorative justice that can make them aware of the impact of their act on the people around them, the people they love, the people they care about, their own families, their teachers, their you name it. And so we need to pull together as a community. And I think that's really a critical factor. I think it's one of the things, it's right where mental health comes into education, if you ask me.
So knowing that we've seen walkouts across Colorado this month because of school shootings, what does school safety mean to you, and how will you support students who are rightfully worried about the safety of their education?
Boy, that's a big one. And that does expand well beyond the domain of schooling itself. It plays into all kinds of issues related to guns and the role that police officers and or what shall we call them? Parapolice officers. In other words, people who play security roles on campuses and school resource officers, excuse me. And I can tell you that I have yet to go to a school that doesn't watch their doors vigilantly, very, very, very vigilantly, and monitors who comes in and out of those doors. But as we know from some of the school shooting incidents we've heard about, the horrifying things that happen, sometimes it's a person you have the least the least awareness of who's inside the school system, inside the schools. So I don't know what we do about that, except maybe reopen the conversation about when guns are appropriate and when they're not. And are we willing to reconsider this absolute approach to no one's going to touch my gun, and move towards more, well, wait a minute. I can support a law that says we're going to keep our guns under lock and key, or we're going to ban semi-automatic. That conversation is way beyond school domain to influence. And that's where most of the problems we have with school security and safety are. It's not within schools or teachers watching carefully, and I see evidence that they look at bullying very closely. A lot of schools spend a lot of time, and a lot of their school walls are papered with things talking about how kids need to interact with one another and be respectful of one another. So that's part of what the whole child part of what education is about, that people think of kids as brains too much and not enough as personalities and physical bodies that need exercise and need breaks. And I've seen real change in that over the course of my 35 years in education. And in general, for the better, frankly, and not so much focused on test scores, by the way.
Speaking about student well-being and thinking about academic excellence in that lens, how do you think that PSD should approach things like class sizes, staffing, resource allocation in the years coming?
Well, I say again, on my website, I comment on the fact that it seems like there's never been a time in our history where we spent enough on education. So there's always pressure on the system for resources and for using them effectively. And some schools do better with it than others, and some school leaders are more effective at making efficient use and clever use, innovative use of resources to optimize the impact of them. But again, that fight about adequate resources extends upward through the school system. It extends to the state. The state provides a huge percentage. The local community does. We benefit in Poudre School District from tremendous support in the community for the school district. We just passed a mill levy, which is going to be very important in terms of addressing issues of school closures and consolidation, which we have to be very careful about how we go about. We need that input from people in the community about the schools that they send their kids to. We need to hear how well they're doing, where they could improve. We need to put that to work as part of our decisions about whether we actually, in fact, need to close schools, or we can figure out best ways to consolidate programs that fit well together. And it's a long, involved conversation. It may mean we don't make the right fiscal decision immediately, and we won't make it any better if we rush ourselves in it than we will if we take a little bit longer to make it. So if you ask me, those issues, those are my top three issues: the whole child, and not in this order, by the way. I'm going up the ladder this time. The whole child, the use of our mill levy dollars, and how we handle our school closures and consolidations, if any. I think those are critical. I think the fact that we have put those priorities high on our list is why Poudre School District enjoys such incredible support from the community in general. And we still need to attend to the individual complaints and the responses to lawsuits and hirings and firings and so forth in the district.
Knowing that the partnership with Front Range Community College drives some of the schedule choices that the district makes, how do we prioritize and optimize education with teacher work and prep days and the need for in-classroom education as well? Knowing that a lot of the communication that has gone out for parents in particular has been around school start times and heat, and just talk about AC in particular schools and having to take certain days off in certain schools. How do we balance all of those and communicate well and effectively to parents?
Part of the reason I think I failed clown school is because I couldn't juggle very well. And I gotta say, I'm going to try to do my best to learn that juggling. Darn it! And maybe eventually they'll license me to be a clown in the state of Colorado. I'm not sure, but we'll find out. Prioritizing is tough. It's going to take 7 minds and 7 thoughtful people who care about the schools to work together to find the solutions to how do we balance it all. My son, by the way, did what they call concurrent enrollment. He was concurrently enrolled in Front Range and Polaris Expeditionary School. And between those two, he came home one time from his sophomore year of schooling and said, Dad, he was nervous. He said, I think I'm a hands-on learner. And he was at Poudre High School, and I said, wow, I was excited because as a teacher educator, I knew if you have some idea of how you learn, that's a huge benefit. And so he comes home and says that to me, and I get really excited. And I said, and I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop on that one. And he says, do you mind if we go to Polaris and see if they have openings there? And I said, no, absolutely. It was kind of near the end of fall semester, and he wanted to maybe transfer in the spring. And sure enough, they had openings. I've never had to win a lottery for my kids to have those kinds of opportunities. And I'm very fortunate for that because I don't want to take an opportunity away from another kid to make that happen. But he loved automotive technology, and he took an internship, and he has been working as an automotive technology person for automotive technician. Sorry, I still call them mechanics, but that's how old school I am. But he automotive technician, and he is at the vanguard of people who are electric auto technicians. And so I think he's going to make more money than I ever made, but he's doing what he loves to do. I think that's the secret. If you can help kids find what they love and what they're passionate about, just like I have been fortunate to do it myself, makes all the difference in the world. I don't care if I'm a volunteer on the school board. I'm going to do the work anyway because I find it fascinating and rewarding on so many other levels. And that's what we need to help kids do and connect and benefit. So we strengthen the school to work pipeline instead of the school to prison one.
I think that's a really apt point. And talking about how each school has different modalities, different approaches to, and really different specialties with
curriculum. Yeah.
The question for me is, with all of the different growth that's happening in Fort Collins, Tinmouth, and Wellington, how should PSD plan for new schools and facilities? And what's your ideal outcome, knowing that you're one of 7, but what is your ideal outcome for new schools and facilities?
One of the interesting things I've noticed as I've substituted around Loveland and around Fort Collins fairly extensively is that when we are building new schools, they tend to have all the latest bells and whistles, and they're designed architecturally to meet the needs of increased technology and integrating technology into instruction and into kids' lives and the kinds of things that they are learning. And I think we need to be aware that there's a possibility for some of these older schools that were built with bricks and it's really hard to retrofit adequate technology into those schools, that there are going to be times where we spend a larger amount of our resources on schools that need to be retrofitted to keep up with the ones that are being built new. So what happens is new schools get built in new developments. It makes sense, right? You want to put a school somewhere in the middle of that new development, or ideally near it at least, so that kids have reasonable access and that we don't have to spend a disproportionate amount of our money transporting kids at great distances across the campus to get the education we want them to have access to. And so again, it's another one of those balancing, juggling things of how do we make sure that all kids have access to the tools and the resources and support they need, regardless of who they are, to the best of our ability. And that's the juggle that happens within every school and across every district in the United States. And some districts are more or less committed to fairness for kids, and some are more committed to keeping up with all the latest bells and whistles at the new schools they build, I should say. But I am in favor of trying to figure out how to strike that balance. So no kid over at this old school with all the bricks and hard to retrofit is stuck, while the schools that are built in new communities or new sub-communities, development areas and so forth, benefit from all those latest bells and whistles.
So I'm hearing you advocate for an all across the district policy. And knowing that school board is one of the most visible roles in local government, are there any community perspectives that you're intentionally seeking to amplify as part of your candidacy, or voices that you feel are underheard?
I want to talk about some that are filling gaps. So early in my campaign, I was getting a lot of questions. You remember in springtime, as the federal administration was starting to take over and propose budgets and talk about education departments and the role of the federal government in helping to fund schools around the country, there was a lot of conversation, a lot of people asking me questions about, what are we going to do if that federal budget cut comes down? Or what are we going to do when the state has to respond to the big hole in their budget? And how it's going to impact Poudre School District and people. And so I started thinking about that a lot. I said, well, look, I don't know how much of this suggested or proposed budget cuts, how much of these are going to be actually implemented, and how many are going to affect Poudre School District in such and such a way. It's really impossible to tell how all the chips will finally fall into place, right? So what are we going to do while we're waiting for the chips to fall into place? Well, I spent the summer, besides working on my website, I spent the summer visiting nonprofit organizations and various partnerships that already exist. You know, the Fort Collins Chamber of Commerce has an amazing program to help connect the schools and graduates from Poudre School District to job opportunities to serve in internships that help local businesses meet their employment demands and so forth, and also provide real-time applied experience in the fields that kids think that they want to pursue. You know, they may be right or wrong once they have those internships, but that's part of the process too. That's a good example of this isn't just about do you have the skills, it's about do you really want to do this, at least for as far as you can see 5 years down the road, or don't you? So you got Chamber of Commerce, you got North Fort Collins Business Association dying for want of North Fort Collins Business Association. I went to a meeting and found out that they are anxious to have more plumbers and electricians and roofers and whatever, you know, all the trades, what we used to call the trades, and dying for employees to come into those roles. And the school district has responded by providing this program, or by cutting the ribbon on this program that's intended to fill those gaps. So there is a lot of responsiveness going on, maybe never enough. It always seems like we're always trying to catch up to, you know, and the school district has to respond to these changes. Now we've got people wondering about what's going to happen when AI comes. If I knew the answer to that, I would work my magic and we would suddenly have that problem resolved. It's not necessarily a problem. There's benefits, there's problems with it. But AI is coming, whether we like it or not, and it's driven by huge demand from the private sector, and we'll have to make those adjustments just like we had to make them when computers first came on the scene and kids were expected to have computers in the classroom, or just as the pandemic did, and teachers had to suddenly scramble to figure out how they're going to teach online for the first time, and many teachers had to. So we roll with the punches. We do the best we can. We be as supportive as we can of the individual staff members and the families and the kids, the populations in our schools. And we try to maintain as positive an attitude about it as possible. That's part of my, that's why my background as a clown, I think, is so important, because in spite of how serious these issues are, we also need to have something of a sense of humor. So that's one of the things I promised to bring to the school board too.
It's an approach that I think has merit, to bring hope into situations where, you're talking about the federal cuts. A lot of those affect the Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV, all of those programs that are dedicated to often the low income or English second learner language programs, the folks who are disadvantaged in our communities, and a lot of that funding is under fire, along with the programs that help support teachers to offer those things. So,
yes.
Hope can go a long way, and I think some proactivity as well, which I'm hearing you advocate for.
Yeah, and what I'm saying, Nick, is I'm going to be as proactive as you will see any board member be, because I am willing to put half-time work into it minimum, and I will pursue the channels that open up as a result of what I'm pushing for. I'm a very proactive kind of a guy. You can ask anybody who knows me.
Tom, we're hitting that part of the interview where we're going to rapid fire questions. So I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions. Whatever comes to the top of mind at first is just fine. So what is your favorite local coffee shop?
Oh man, I don't go to coffee shops regularly. I'm something of a coffee snob, so I make my own most of the time. But I have a special affection for Wolverine Farms, but I don't exclusively go to Wolverine Farms when I buy coffee outside the house.
What is your favorite park in Fort Collins or nearby?
I live next to Martinez Park. I am fortunate to be next to the Poudre River. It's phenomenal. I also benefit from being up on a rise. I don't have to worry about flooding. And I got to say, Martinez Park, it's hands down for me. It's the place I go to bicycle ride 8 miles round trip a couple times a week, 2-3 times a week. It's my park.
Is there a school subject that you loved the most as a student?
I have always been interested in the social sciences, so I felt so fortunate when I became a professor of foundations that I needed to understand enough about all the social sciences: psychology, sociology, politics, economics, legal, history, to be able to teach them in a kind of an integrated way. So my knowledge is a mile wide and perhaps in some respects an inch deep. But the social sciences in general was what fascinated me.
What was your least favorite subject in school?
I avoided the sciences. No offense to any scientist. I admire great scientists. I served on the Air Quality Advisory Board. You mentioned boards that we serve on. Air Quality Advisory Board. And my joke was that my main qualification was that I grew up in the LA air basin during the worst smog in the history of the United States in the 1950s and 60s. I would come back from recess barely able to breathe. But that was my qualification to get appointed at the Air Quality Advisory Board. And I had so much admiration for all the environmental scientists who were serving on that board with me, and learned a lot about air quality, but I couldn't recite it on a snap quiz. I'd be in deep doo-doo if that happened.
Favorite book?
John Steinbeck, Grapes of Wrath. I read it in 10th grade. I maybe 11th. I remember looking at it going, I don't want to read that book. It's 600 pages long, for heaven's sake. What do you expect of me? I read it. I fell in love with the people in that book, with their struggles. It was about Okies moving to California during the Depression. And I was so moved by it that it has endured as my favorite book in spite of all the great books I've read since then.
Would you consider yourself an early bird or a night owl?
Ooh, I'm an early bird. I get up at 4:30 most mornings to go to substitute teach. Definitely. And I got to get to bed by 10:30 or I pay for it the next day. So definitely an early bird.
What's one word that you would use to describe PSD schools today?
Amazing. Amazing. It's amazing how well we do with what we have. And with the people who are dedicated to it, it's amazing. It's amazing. I'm in awe of the teachers, and I applaud the teachers and all the staff members who work in those schools. I'm completely reliant on them as a substitute teacher, as you might imagine.
Is there someone in public service that you look up to as a role model?
Well, I got to say, my prized endorsement is from former state senator Bob Bacon. And I have admired him. When I first moved to Colorado in 2000, I was amazed. I could drive 2 miles down the street and I could sit in an audience with all the candidates who were running for office at that time. It was an even year election. So state senators, House of Representatives, Bob Bacon was running for House of Representatives. I was so amazed I could actually, as contrasted to my experience in California, where I could barely have contact with any of my representatives at all. It was suddenly, I was sitting across from whoever was going to serve on in the state house. And I go, I like this. This is cool. This is really cool. So I went up to Bob Bacon afterward, shook his hand, and he has now endorsed me for my candidacy. And I'm deeply humbled and honored by that because I have so much respect for him.
Awesome. If you could have one superpower to improve PSD overnight, what would it be?
Before you snap that question, I should also say I have support from across the board politically, and you should look at that on my website too. Okay, so now on to the superpower country question. Superpower, wow. Well, to make some of the changes, to be helping implement some of the changes that I think would benefit the schools and the community that I will serve if I'm elected.
What do you hope PSD looks like 20 years from now?
I hope that it has the support it has now, that it continues to have strong public support because it seeks to build the partnerships that help withstand things like budget cuts, because we have so many innovative people here and so many people willing to volunteer time. We have Coats and Boots and McBackpack and Smile, the Smile Project. I'm missing the name of that one. But they're examples, and then the Chamber of Commerce stuff and the Restorative Justice Program, the city sponsors. If that continues, we're going to make it through in spite of what we have to confront.
Is there anything else that you'd like the audience to know about you or your campaign, Tom?
You know, you did such a great job of asking me good questions that I'm not sure I have a whole lot more to add. I just need people to remember that this isn't about developing a future political career, no matter what happens in that respect. I'm probably not going to be becoming president of the United States anytime soon. So I'm not working on that. I'm here to volunteer. I'm willing to volunteer. I have the good fortune to be in a position to volunteer. And I would be thrilled to serve on the Poudre School District School Board.
Thanks for that, Tom. Where can we learn more about you and your campaign?
Okay, website or Facebook. Those are the two main things I've developed so far. And the Facebook thing, we're still scrambling to get the social media thing the way we would like it to be. But the website is what I've spent a lot of time on. And my goal has always been, in developing the website, as much transparency as possible about what I represent and what I stand for. So I'm trying not to pull any punches or use deceptive language in any way. That website address is Tom Griggs for PSD.org. Easy to find, makes sense. It's intended to be user-friendly. Got all kinds of information there about my platform, about who's endorsed me, about my background and my deep volunteer experience in Poudre School District as my kids were going through the system, even as I was developing my career over in Greeley at UNC. And so, and now I've become a Fulbright scholar, which I'm also deeply honored about. That's all there on the website. But Tom Griggs for PSD.org, or Tom Griggs, the number 4, the letters PSD. That's my Facebook page. Tom Griggs 4, number 4, PSD.
Well, Tom, thanks so much for joining me on Dear Fort Collins. I appreciate the time and the effort to answer all the questions. I know there was a ton of them.
Yeah, well, and great questions, Nick. As I told you before we even started, I appreciated the thought that went into the questions, and we've had a great conversation. And I thank you for your efforts.
Absolutely. Well, to learn more from your candidates in this election, Dear Fort Collins is a good resource, and we hope that you continue to listen in and learn from the candidates that you get a chance to vote for this November.